Welcome to section 5, where we'll be tackling three main tasks on our way to building our single-page app. These tasks respectively are client-side routing, dealing with networks and APIs, and adding an authentication system to our app. In this video, we're going to lay down the basics of routing by using a library called React Router. We'll tackle the basics of using it, then integrate it in our existing app, and then expand on these concepts throughout the course whenever we add a new page or feature. Now, before we start, let's look at our requirements. We want to have several public routes that are available to users who are not logged in. We need a jobs list page, a page for individual job postings, and a simple login page. For logged in users, there's additional routes depending on their role. Regular users should be able to see their job postings and add new ones, while admins should be able to see and edit all job postings on the platform. Putting it all together, we can see a set of pretty common route types that one might encounter while building a web app. We should also take this time to note some special cases that we'll need to cover. We need a general 404 page, and we need to make sure users are redirected when they try to access pages they do not have permission for. Now this is a lot of work, so we'll take it step by step. So to get started, let's add React Router to our project. The exact name of the package is actually React Router DOM. This might take a while, but once we're done, let's start our app and we'll work out a simple example in an isolated sandbox before we add all of this into our main app. I've already created a sandbox file called React Router Playground. You can find this file in the provided code files of the course. I'm going to mount this component instead of our app component as we play around with it. We did the same thing while learning styled components, so you should already be familiar with this idea. Now you'll notice that aside from importing React, there's a few more interesting imports here. We've imported 4 components from the React Router DOM package. So the browser router is basically the main wrapper for all of this. It uses the HTML5 history API to keep your UI in sync with the URL in the address bar. Route is a component whose most basic responsibility is to render some other UI component when a given location matches the route's path. Switch is a helper that wraps around a bunch of route components and makes sure that only the first one that matches a given path is rendered. In its rendering logic, this component doesn't work much differently than all of the other conditional rendering tricks that we've used in this course so far. So when you see this switch component, you can think of all those little tips and tricks that we already learned. Finally, link is React Router's abstraction over the anchor element. It provides us with a component for declarative and accessible navigation around the application. Now below this, you'll notice 4 components that we'll be rendering depending on the route. The only interesting one here is the job component. As you can see, it takes a prop called match and prints out some job ID property. This is basically the name of the dynamic parameter in the route. While the name match is honestly not a very good one, this prop is simply provided by React Router, so we have to deal with it. Now let's look at the main render method of this playground. You'll see a bunch of different links here. It's imitating some sort of navigation bar using the link component. And below that, inside of the switch component, you can see 3 routes and the 4th one, which is a catch-all default route. As you can see, we prefix the job ID parameter with a colon, which is how React Router knows that this is a dynamic property that should be mapped and assigned to a job ID prop. And if we run this code, we'll see that everything works as expected. No surprises. We can also play around with the address bar to see what happens. As you can see, there is no real validation of what job ID is supposed to look like. And if we try to open some route that was not defined initially, we will hit a 404 page. Which means the switch is using our default catch-all component. Excellent. Okay, so that was fun, but let's now integrate all of this into our existing application. Now I've gone ahead and I've refactored things a bit. You will see that our main app component is now much smaller and a lot of things are missing. This is because I've created a new directory called containers, and I've moved some things in here. The containers directory is basically going to serve as a directory where we keep all of our pages. So now we have a job create page, which is simply a component that renders our job creation form. And we have a job list page that handles the loading and presentation of jobs. I'm going to import and add one of these to just confirm that everything works like we remember it. Excellent. Let's now start adding in our desired routes. I'm quickly going to copy all of those imports from our playground example into our app.js file. And now I'm slowly going to start adding some basic routes. We want the main route to show a list of all jobs. Then we want an add job route that shows the job creation page. And let's check if all of this works so far. Oh, we've hit an error, and it turns out that the main router wrapper must have a single child in its hierarchy. And this is a common pattern with third-party libraries that use the Context API. And it's no real problem. We can just wrap everything inside of a div to avoid this issue. But you'll notice that we maybe have been doing this a bit too much. We're constantly adding divs as wrappers, and it's a bit of a pain, but it also pollutes the DOM with wrappers, these div elements that serve no purpose other than to contain other pieces of code inside of them. And we can deal with this in a much easier way. We can instead use React fragments. Fragments let you group a list of children without adding extra nodes to the DOM. Here's how it looks like. And as we can now see, we now have a functioning home page and a job creation page on its own separate route. But we still have a long way to go. We should start by updating our navigation component to use real links and not just the mock items that we have right now. Inside of our navigation component, I've imported the link component from React Router DOM. I'm going to update all of these items into actual links that correspond to proper routes. I'm also going to update the styling a bit to remove the default link styles that are applied by the browser. And now, as you can see, we can jump between our two pages. We also have a login link, but that just returns a blank page, as we've not implemented it yet. Let's quickly cover this case by adding a 404 component that we can render for non-existing routes. Excellent. We've taken our first steps in routing. We'll continue adding more routes and different rules, but for now we can be satisfied with our accomplishments so far. Routing is not a simple task in front-end development, yet we've created something functional in less than 10 minutes.